It's my privilege to welcome the participants and guests of our biannual Baltic Symposium, whose theme this year is the Baltic States in a Changing Europe. I'm Diane Koenker, and I'm the new director of the School of Slavonic and East European Studies here at UCL. Before I continue, I have some important safety announcements to make. First, the fire exits are located in the rear, the door you came in, and also the emergency door in the back. Second, the toilets are located on the lower ground floor, one floor below us. And finally, not such a safety announcement, but as you see, the proceedings of the symposium are filmed. And if you're unwilling to appear in the video that we will produce, please see one of our staff members to make arrangements. Now, I've been on the job only since January, but one of my pleasant tasks has been to participate in the planning of this symposium, along with the representatives of the Baltic Council and the embassies of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and our own UCL staff. This is the 9th symposium that we have hosted here at SSEES, and while change has been a constant factor in the region over the last 20 years or more, I'm sure you'll agree that consideration of changing Europe in 2018 has never been so timely. I'm looking forward to what each of our distinguished panelists has to tell us about the conditions and challenges and opportunities the region faces today. I want to extend a particular welcome to our panelists and chairs who come to us from the worlds of diplomacy, academia, culture, business, and government, and often combining more than one of these portfolios. And as a new champion of the School of Slavonic and East European Studies, I'd like to say a few more words about the school because I'd like you to know what a remarkably unique institution is hosting this invaluable symposium today. UCL SSEES is one of the world's leading specialist institutions and the largest national center in the UK for the multidisciplinary study of Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe and Russia. SSEES was founded in 1915, more than 100 years ago, by Thomas Garrigue-Masaryk, who was later elected president of Czechoslovakia. It was part of King's College then, but subsequently functioned as an independent entity within the University of London. In 1999, SSEES merged with UCL, and in 2004, it moved into our present purpose-built and prize-winning building, which is just around the corner from the Institute of Archaeology. The SSEES Library, with more than 400,000 items, is one of the largest in the world devoted to East European studies. SSEES is currently educating about 1,000 students. About 700 of these are undergraduates, pursuing degrees in a number of program areas, including economics and business, politics and sociology, and language and culture. At the postgraduate level, we offer both teaching and research MA degrees, including the International Masters in Economy, State, and Society, a double degree program with a consortium of European universities, including UCL, the University of Belgrade, Charles University, Corvinus University, Helsinki University, the Higher School of Economics in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, Jagiellonian University, and the University of Tartu. Currently, about 60 PhD students are pursuing their studies here as well. SSEES is home to perhaps the largest concentration of academic staff devoted to the study of the region, with about 60 academics whose fields include history, business and economics, politics, sociology, literature and culture, and the teaching of foreign languages. We have the capacity to teach 18 languages of the region, including Estonian, Latvian, and Lithuanian, and we employ 27 part-time or full-time language teachers on our staff. In addition to research and teaching, the third crucial mission of SSEES has been to collaborate with the public, providing and mobilizing expertise for government, the public sphere, and the general public. We take great satisfaction in working with governments of the region in order to provide information and to support our learning environments. The symposium today is an outstanding example of our commitment to this kind of engagement. Today's event is one of many exciting academic and public events that SSEES sponsors every year. Some of them emerge from our 2 research centers. Fringe is UCL's Center for the Study of Social and Cultural Complexity, and it examines how seemingly opposed notions such as centrality and marginality and clarity and ambiguity can shift and converge when embedded in everyday practices. Our second major research center is the UCL Center for Comparative Studies of Emerging Economies, which brings together scholars not only from our region, but also from Korea and Mexico. The center showcases the way in which knowledge produced through the study of our own area can be shared globally and produce new theoretical and applied approaches to common problems. The list of our activities could go on forever, including one-off events like our panel on McMafia, the reality, that drew a crowd of more than 200 last January on a very cold night. And you can revisit many of these through our YouTube channel. And we are pleased that this symposium will join our library of public events that will be open to the broadest possible public. I arrived in London in January at a moment of great uncertainty about future relations between the United Kingdom and the rest of the world. EU membership has played an inestimable role in fostering academic interchange and collaboration. Europe is indeed changing, but whatever the outcome of Brexit, the work of communication and collaboration represented by this symposium will guarantee that open intellectual borders will remain the hallmark of our roles in the academy, the world of scholarly inquiry, and the realm of public affairs. So I wish you a productive and stimulating symposium. And now it's my privilege to introduce to you the chair of the keynote session, Her Excellency Ms. Tiina, Ambassador of Estonia to the United Kingdom.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you very much for the introduction. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce my former boss, Urmas Paet. Urmas Paet, and he was a little bit not happy to have to sit at the lower table, but this is how it is. Urmas Paet is going to give this morning's keynote speech. And right now he is a member of the European Parliament. Estonia has 6 MEPs, so Urmas Paet is one of them. And he has a very strong interest in foreign and security policy. He's member of Foreign Affairs Committee in the Parliament, and he's also rapporteur for cyber defense, and has led the initiative for establishing European Defense Union, and is also a co-rapporteur for EU Arctic policy reports. Urmas Paet is very well known in Estonia, having been the longest serving foreign minister, almost for 10 years, and before that, Minister of Culture. Urmas Paet is a liberal member of the Estonian Reform Party, and he has studied at the University of Tartu, but also in Oslo and in Lund. And he will be speaking today about the challenges and opportunities in the global and EU foreign and defense policy. Urmas Paet, you have the floor.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, first I'd like to thank you for this great opportunity to enjoy this morning together with you. And I'd like just to confirm that my intention is not to have, 1 hour of monologue, but yes, I will make introductory remarks, and afterwards I hope that we can rather sooner than later switch from the monologue into the dialogue, so that all your questions, comments, and also solutions to the issues I'm going to raise will also here be handled. But well, as we are today here in the symposium or seminar, which is organized by good friends from Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and also the school here, then of course all the issues I'm going to mention have also direct link or direct influence to our countries. And of course today's main environment for foreign and security policy for our countries, it is our membership in the European Union and also our membership in NATO. And that's why I am going to concentrate on main challenges and also the problems at this stage which we are facing altogether in Europe. When I start describing situation in the European Union and Europe, then of course, as we all know, there are at least 4, 5 or even 6 big issues in front of us where it is rather difficult to find very quick and functional solutions. The issue number 1 I'd like to address is the security issue. Because if you look at the moment at the result of the public opinion actually in all European Union member states, then the issue number 1, what people are telling us what concerns them is the issue of security. And of course the reasons why people think that security at the moment is the most important challenge are different. If you look, for example, to our region, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, partly also Northern Europe, then the main security concern relates to issue of Russia. If you look at Western Europe, then the main security concern relates to the terrorism. If we look at Southern Europe, then it's maybe a little bit mixed, but still issues related to the immigration and instability in wider Middle East and Northern and Central Africa, and of course also issues related to terrorism as well. So that the reasons are slightly different, but the outcome is the same, and the outcome is that people say that also Europe, European Union, has to do much more in the sphere of defense and security. As we all know, during all the previous decades, defense and security has not been the issue for the European Union, because the clear understanding was that there is NATO, and it's NATO's main duty also to take care of security and defense of Europe. But because of the developments and events during last years, increased instability, more and more people also realize that also the EU has to put more efforts and also resources to increase the level of security for its citizens. And that's why the, let me say, only, real new development in the EU at the moment, that there is also large consensus, is European defense cooperation, or so-called European Defense Union. As you know, the target is that for 2025, all the goals which have been set during the last couple of years for the European Defense Cooperation, European Defense Union, should be achieved. And it means that in the framework of the present legal conditions, or on the basis of treaties, Lisbon Treaty and others, there is also space to develop real European defense cooperation. And there are many elements in this potential cooperation and framework. Of course, the basics is that everything EU is going to do in the sphere of defense should go hand in hand with NATO, so that there is no competition between EU and NATO. There are certain areas where already the competence of the EU is great and maybe even stronger in many spheres than in NATO. For example, spheres like cyber defense, cyber security, because all the most important possible targets for the cyber attacks, they actually are civilian ones. But in today's world, successful cyber attack also, of course, may cause casualties, and it may be lethal. Here in the UK, you can recall last summer massive cyber attacks against hospitals in the UK, but we all also can imagine what can happen if there are successful cyber attacks, for example, against nuclear power plants in Europe. There are plenty of them, or air traffic control, or just electricity power plants, railways, and so on and so on. And there are no conflicts anymore in the world where there is no path for cyber attacks and cyber conflict. So it means that cyber defense is one of the really fast developing areas, and it also should be for the European Union, also together with NATO. But at the moment, as experts say, we are missing in Europe around 150,000 experts who really can do something on cyber defense, and if sometimes needed, we also should not avoid the issue of cyber attacks, because if it's a really conflict and for example Europe or some European countries are under massive cyber attacks, we also should not only defend or protect, but sometimes there will be also need maybe for counterattacks in this regard. And the second issue, where already EU in cooperation with NATO should have its clear input, is hybrid threats. as the word itself says, that it is the combination of different risks. Again, not only military ones, but also civilian ones, be it so-called green men, or be it massive propaganda, be it fake news, be it all the manipulation in the social media, and so on and so on. So that to handle effectively also the increasing risks related to hybrid threats, it's also more and more Europe's or European Union's duty. We also should speak about so-called military Schengen. It means that inside Europe it should be very fast and efficient if you really need to move the troops or equipment from one country to another. So far it has been rather bureaucratic and time-consuming, but we all understand that if somewhere in Europe the risk is quickly growing, then it also should be possible swiftly and effectively to move troops and equipment, so that we also should get over from this burden. Budget. Also the idea of the European Defence Cooperation will be only idea if there is no adequate support from Europe's budget side. At the moment we are in preparation for next financial framework of the EU, and it well, clearly says that also the part of defence should be there. Of course there is defence industry research, but there also should be the support, for example, for infrastructure. During the last couple of years, for example, NATO decided to increase its presence, or the presence of allies, in some European countries, including mine in Estonia, but the majority of the financial burdens is on the shoulders of the host country, which in this sense is not adequate, because the additional troops are not in our countries because only to protect this or that particular country, but still to protect all Europe, all the EU, and also all the other NATO allies in Europe. So it means that if we have the example of European Union's budget, which is based on solidarity also from financial point of view, then we also should not exclude security and defense from this. So that this is, of course, completely new thinking also for the European budget and budgetary process. So that, well, one of the, as I said, one of the big issues at the moment is defense cooperation for Europe, and also from Estonia's, and I guess also from other countries' point of view from our region, every effort, also every cent spent on defense, or also to increase security in Europe is, I guess, well spent, and it's under given circumstances necessary development. Second issue I wanted to touch is related, of course, to security. It is issue called refugees, and all what Europe has seen during the last couple of years. The problem is that refugee issue remains on our table, because if you look at our immediate neighborhood, be it east or south, be it Africa, be it wider Middle East, then there are so many conflicts that unfortunately the flow of refugees anyway will continue. Of course, Syria and the war in Syria is the worst still at the moment, with close to 7 million refugees, 3.5 million plus are in Turkey. As you know, there is at the moment agreement between the EU and Turkey, which still keeps most of Syrian refugees in Turkey. But we also should be in this sense very clear that this gives for Erdogan, for Turkey, also some space for manipulation with Europe. Because I guess majority still of this 3.5 million refugees in Turkey, they actually, if they would have the chance, they would like to continue towards Europe as long as war in Syria continues. And all other conflicts. So that if we look at Italy in this regard, then, well, all representatives or politicians in Italy, they say that they haven't seen so bad year for Italy what concerns income of refugees as last year. And we also saw the outcome of recent Italian parliamentary elections, where anti-European or populist parties got good results, and the main reasons were the same. Refugee issue, because there is feeling that Europe is not doing enough to assist Italy in this regard, and second issue is economy, of course. Again, good to blame European Union. And with refugee issue, well, there are of course two sides. One is what can we do inside Europe, and second issue, what can we do outside Europe. First, inside, there is no good solution. Unfortunately, there is also good ground for further conflict between European or EU member states on this issue, because as we all know, on the one hand, there are countries who are receiving refugees, be it the same Italy or be it Germany or Sweden or some others, and then there are countries who have 180 degrees opposite position, and they say that they will not receive any refugee, be it Hungary or be it some other countries in Central Europe. And of course it is basis for tensions also between politicians in Europe and societies in Europe. And how to handle this issue inside Europe, it's very complicated, because this quota system is not functioning too well, because under circumstances of free movement, people can still in final end choose where they want to go. Also, well, in Estonia, we received close to 200 refugees, mainly from Italy. The situation at the moment is that most of them left for Germany, because in Germany, well, the social guarantees are better and the community is already there and so on. And it's also the case for many other countries in Europe. It means that also this quota system, unfortunately or fortunately, doesn't actually work, as long as people also have their own choice. And second issue is how to handle or what can we do better outside Europe. Well, here of course are two maybe main pillars. One is support for refugee receiving countries between Europe and conflict country. When we speak about Syrian war, then of course countries like Lebanon or Jordan or the same Turkey, which are receiving a lot of refugees. So that, and the aim should be that the motivation for people, or the need for people immediately to continue their trip towards Europe will not be that high. And then of course second is what Europe can do to influence these conflicts towards the end, or this diplomatic effort. And of course here again, soft power of Europe is not enough. That's why I guess also the idea of defense union is important, that soft power should be combined with, let's say, hard power. And it also means that different tools of European foreign policy should also be much more interlinked to each other. For example, if there are clear political positions or foreign policy positions of Europe, they also should be supported with other elements. I mean here, this, for example, development cooperation, because Europe is certainly the biggest donor globally at the moment, but it's not always when foreign policy goals and, for example, donor money go hand in hand. I recall here, for example, 2008, when Georgia, as you remember, was attacked by Russia, and South Ossetian and Abkhazian statehoods were declared. Of course, EU was clearly opposing the recognition of Abkhazia and South Ossetia as independent countries. At the same time, Nicaragua was one of the few who decided to recognize the independence of these two territories. Well, and a few days later, European Union proudly announced another, big delivery of financial support for Nicaragua government. So that it is in this sense very bad example how one hand doesn't know what another is doing. And of course it's also influencing then the credibility of EU's foreign and security policy as such, if things like this are happening. Few words also about economy and trade issues, because it's also more and more important. In this sense, I fully support European Union's efforts to have more free trade agreements with third countries, but it also should mean that the strategic interests of Europe should be protected. And in this regard, of course, for Europe, United States actually should be the main partner, but unfortunately, as we all again recall, when President Trump's administration came into the office, then one of the first moves was to stop or even prevent real negotiations between the US and the EU on free trade, which was followed the decisions related to the climate change, and just recently we almost entered into the trade war between the EU and US, which is very unfortunate development. But economy, of course, also for European people is the issue number 2 right after security. And then still, if you look some regions in Europe, the economic development unfortunately has not been so fast that they reached the situation which was before recent economic crisis, 2008 and 9. The unemployment rate in some countries, especially among young people, is really high, and it of course also influences the politics, influences the internal atmosphere and environment in some mainly southern European countries. So that here also we have to be very careful, because the same example of Italy we recently had, it also may be developed into some other countries. And then of course to reach consensus on the European Union level will be in certain issues more and more complicated and difficult. Issue of Russia. Here, unfortunately, I think we actually have entered into the deadlock situation, because there is no good or any potentially good solution at this stage. Yeah, there are sanctions decided by the EU and its friends and allies, and there are concrete reasons why sanctions were decided and implemented, but there is no any sign of development that Russia is going to change or move something from its behavior which caused the policy of sanctions, especially related to the annexation of the Crimea or direct intervention in eastern Ukraine. And it means that there is no reason, if we want to keep Europe's foreign policy and security policy credibility, to change the sanction policy before something really changes with reasons for this. And in all spheres, be it Syria, be it the permanent military exercises on the Baltic Sea or on the Black Sea or even on the Pacific Ocean. I just visited Japan and South Korea. They also noticed all the same aggressive behavior of Russia, what we are noticing here in Europe. So that in this regard, I guess that the tactics of Putin's Russia at the moment is to keep tense relations with West, with democratic world, to build up its foreign policy developments with other countries and then powers, be it China, be it India, be it others, and to keep this sense of sort of confrontation with West and including Europe and including also all NATO countries, because they need it also for domestic purposes. To have so-called foreign ally, of course, keeps domestic audience united to support a leader, even maybe there are some economic difficulties or something else, but it's classics. Always you should have somebody outside to keep your domestic situation or domestic audience supporting you. And it also leads me to the issue of Arctic, where I was European Parliament rapporteur. I shortly also want to mention these issues because I see that Arctic will be one of the areas in the world where we're going to notice very rapid changes in the foreseeable future, and it's because of climate change, it's because of physical changes in Arctic. It means that less ice and more access to natural resources, new navigational routes. For example, it's now fully navigable, or it's fully open now, the route from Asia to Europe through the Arctic Ocean, in parallel of Russia. And it also, well, clearly changes the global trade routes, because today the main trade route between Asia and Europe is through so-called southern seas, which sometimes is also dangerous because of pirates and so on and so on, and it's much longer than the Nordic route. So it is one change. And second, as I mentioned, is natural resources. And it also will mean that some countries, including the same Russia, of course, may do unilateral steps to get more territories under their direct control. So that so far Arctic has been more or less peace and quiet. It has been low tension area, but it's mainly because of ice, and the real resources have not been accessible. And this situation is going to change now very rapidly, so that in this sense also Europe, of course, should pay much more attention to developments in Arctic, because some European countries are also directly Arctic countries, and of course also the same Russia component is clearly there as well. And well, to sum up all these present main concerns for Europe, which also then concern our countries, I mean Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and others in our region, finally it's of course the issue of Brexit, which I guess is actual also here. The only thing at the moment we know for sure about Brexit is that if nothing changes here in the UK, then since the 1st of April next year, UK is for the EU third country. And of course, for me, it's really bad. I guess for most of people in Europe it's really bad, and at the moment we're still in the grey zone, because we don't know which then will exactly be the relationship between Europe and UK. Of course, common sense says that this relationship should be also afterwards as strong as possible. But so far the negotiations between the EU and UK have not been too successful. Time, clock is ticking. In this sense, there is less and less time to have very well negotiated agreement. Be it about economy, be it about the common market, be it about the same security and defense issues, and so on and so on. So that this uncertainty around Brexit, of course, is also one of the factors at the moment which also influences all other spheres. Of course, direct impact is to the budgetary issues of the EU, because if, well, the UK really leaves and there will be no more contribution to EU budget at all, then it is around 10 billion euros minus for the budget, which also, when we speak on the one hand that we'd like to do in the EU new things, the same defense cooperation, the same more adequate combat against problems around Europe, also related to the refugee issue, how to solve this, then of course EU actually for its budget needs more money. And if there will be the whole of 10 billion euros, then the first target is that how remaining EU member states, or are they at all ready to contribute more into the EU budget to fulfill this whole, and then add even something more really to be on needed level when we speak about the same defense issues or refugee issues. Of course, it also gives for the European Union good opportunity to reform its budget and budgetary process. But I'm not too enthusiastic or optimistic that this opportunity will really be used and there will be real reform of the EU budget. We should still recall that more than 40% of EU budget is agricultural subsidies. which I don't think is too innovative or too future-oriented budget approach. So well, as you heard, there are lots of issues where we can call them actually even challenges for Europe. But I'd like to finish my starting monologue still with positive approach, because it also has to be stressed that all the positive achievement which European cooperation and the European Union achieved during last decades, they are there, they are still there. In this sense, nothing happened with our common market, our common economic space in Europe. Nothing happened with free movement of people, free movement of goods and services. Our common foreign and security policy is there, and so on and so on. So it means that actually all the basic and most important elements of European cooperation are there, and they have been unchanged, although there is lots of turbulence around in many spheres. And for Estonia, and I guess also for Latvia, Lithuania, under all these circumstances and under all these risks and challenges, I guess it is still in our vital interest that the Europe will remain strong and will be even stronger, that the cooperation in the European Union and also in NATO is there. It should be strong as strong as possible. So that, well, I think that without this, or if European and Western cooperation is going to weaken, then our countries, well, cannot win from this anything. So that in this regard, I hope that the European and American cooperation also will be more stable again in foreseeable future, because also globally we should stick to our allies and partners, democratic ones in the world, US, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and few others. Because, well, the real challenges globally are coming from really, well, big countries, be it China or India or others. And here, unfortunately, I don't see that especially from values point of view or value-based point of view, be it protection of human rights, be it all these liberal values, we will have good ground for, well, real cooperation for the future. So it means that we still have to value and stick to our, say, natural partners for Europe. Thank you. And now, if you have solutions, I would appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Would you like to stay there?
Of course.
Okay, fine.
I can see good overview.
I think what we do, I will ask a few questions, but then of course we will open up. While you prepare your questions, I think I'm going to ask a few, or at least two. So of course here in London we have a few recurrent themes. One is Brexit, and you addressed Brexit very well, and I think that, you know, we do not have solutions, as you said, and the solutions are very much with the negotiators.
Solutions are in the hands of UK citizens.
Yes, if they are asked once more.
There is still time till the end of March. There is still time to come to the EU with the application that UK is going to withdraw the previous application. And everything continues in a very positive way, which will be the best solution for both, for the rest of the EU and for the UK. This is the
view from Brussels. Here
it is the news from Strasbourg, Brussels, Tallinn, Riga, Vilnius, Helsinki, Stockholm, Copenhagen, Berlin, Paris, Madrid, Lisbon, Athens, Nicosia, and so on and so on.
But what I really wanted to ask is, of course, besides Brexit, increasingly we find ourselves discussing all these hybrid elements that are undermining our societies, like, you know, the use of Facebook for evil purposes, all kinds of propaganda. What is the nature of discussion in the European Parliament on these issues. Is this really seriously perceived as a threat, or is the European Union going to undertake something, some steps in this regard, or what is the feeling in Europe?
The feeling is really mixed, because what should be clear is that no parliament, no legislation can replace the common sense. So that in this regard, some people in the European Parliament are really unhappy that Mr. Zuckerberg is still not facing the European Parliament all the, well, critical questions. But at the same time, I guess also the awareness among politicians, among all society should be there, that these days online and offline are equal. In this sense, all what you're gonna post in your Twitter or Facebook or whatever social network is equal if you would, put the picture and all the comments on the wall of your railway station. So that in this sense, I guess the awareness among users, it means that actually majority of the members of all our societies should be there. What concerns this legal approach, then of course there are certain regulations and so on, and if somebody has violated this, then there should be punishment. But I guess that all of us, when we use, for example, whatever websites, very often the same website asks some sort of permission from us. Do you agree with something? And of course, automatically, most of people, they don't read what it's there. They just say yes because they want to continue, on this website. So that also from legal point of view, there are a lot of cases where actually people themselves, with not reading small letters or text with small letters, they already agreed with everything. And later on to blame that there is somebody bad, who wants to sneak around and do something bad with your face image. Well, and that's why I say that no parliament, no even legislation cannot replace in final end the common sense of each and every person who wants to be active in these social networks.
The second question that I have, that comes very often to us, and I'm going to pass it over to you, concerns the Baltic security. Very often we are being asked, me as Estonian ambassador, but also other Baltic ambassadors, do you think that the subtle and not so subtle messaging that we are giving to Russia in terms of Baltic security, for instance, the deterrent that is there, like NATO forces, but also other messaging, do you think that it works? Do you think that Russia is getting the message? What do you think?
The short answer is yes. In this sense, of course, they're getting the message. Another issue is what they think is good for useful for them. And as I tried to explain, I think that it is their strategic choice at the moment to keep tensions and bad relations with West, and at the same time then to build up the relationship with countries which are not asking issues related to human rights or whatever, some sort of values or whatever. So that I guess it's their very pragmatic and practical choice.
So do you think that there is some issue particularly around the Baltics, or is it more the issue between Russia and the West as such?
It's mainly between Russia and democratic world, because it's even not just, so to say, West in geographical terms, but I also shortly described the same applies to Russia-Japan relations, Russia-South Korea relations, or with relations to Australia and so on. So that in this regard, it's Russia and so-called democratic world as such. It's not that much about politics. I think that for some people, because mainly of emotional purposes, it's, well, very easy to say, well, yesterday it was Ukraine, tomorrow it's Baltics, but it's not adequate in this regard. If you, well, look closer, there are too many differences in these situations, which I always, of course, try to explain if there are still people who want to draw parallels very easily between different parts of the world.